great to be with you today. Some of our people on the call today will be very familiar with yourself and your work, but others maybe less so. So just a little bit by way of introduction. So Professor Rob Moodie, Professor of Public Health at University of Melbourne, having also been Professor of Global Health at the Nossal Institute of Global Health. Worked in refugee healthcare in Sudan, Indigenous health in Alice Springs, and in HIV prevention for the Burnet Institute, WHO, and UNAIDS. In your work as well, you not just there are not too many places, I suspect, around the world that you haven't been to, and not too many public health challenges I suspect you haven't seen. So this work really requires a big perspective and reliance on big data, but also a close and deeply personal engagement with individuals and communities at risk. You've also a lot of various things you've done, including CEO of Vic Health from 1998 to 2007, and chair of the Melbourne Storm Rugby Club from 2006 to 2010. Which were some pretty tricky years in there as well, and chair the advisory board of the Contemplative Studies Centre at the University of Melbourne. But importantly, you've been meditating ever since, I think you called it your quarter life crisis, some years ago, and been a committed meditator ever since. And also you're on the initial working party with Pauline McKinnon, Ian Gawler and myself, to found the Australian Teachers and Meditation Association, which is now Meditation Australia. So we're going to be exploring a whole lot of things about the human condition and meditation and dealing with all of that. So welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yeah. I just wondered, I'd be interested to know what set you on your path of global health and public health at a time I suspect it was not such a big sort of or well-known discipline within healthcare as it is now. What set you on that direction?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I when I reflect, I mean, I was influenced by an uncle who was a professor of global health or a professor of public health at Sydney and had worked in New Guinea, and then actually wrote probably one of the first textbooks on Indigenous health. And I was actually quite keen on the notion of adventure. Actually, I mean, I was very keen to get out of Melbourne. This is in the sort of mid-70s, so I headed for Albury, not too far, and then to France and worked at the American hospital in Paris. And I was just sort of fascinated to start to learn about other cultures and learn other languages. And then I was very keen to go and work in the so-called developing world. So I got a job with Save the Children Fund in Eastern Sudan. And again, I mean, you need experience in international health to get work in international health. Well, obviously, when there are crises around, then they'll take anybody, and they took me. And I found it absolutely fascinating working. First time I'd ever worked in a Muslim culture and learning about Islam, learning about African life and pace and rhythm and approaches and what was important and what it wasn't important. And that notion of such a strong contrast with my own sort of culture inheritance and where I belong and was really striking and as was the difference between what sort of medicine or health I should practice in a place in a refugee camp compared to what I'd been taught, at the Austin Hospital, was pretty different as well. So I've always really quite enjoyed those contrasts in the way people work and see life and understand life, and that's been one of the sort of underlying pleasures of the work that I've done is the people I've met and the places I've been able to experience. I'm not a particularly good tourist, but I'm a really good, go and work and go and learn. I love it. And in a way, I've just been reflecting on this over the last couple of days, how useful or how important I think meditation has been for me to help me learn. And I was even just back up at Alice Springs with our daughter Penny over the weekend, and it reminded me of the deep meaning and contact and connection to land that Indigenous Australians have, and how I learnt a little bit about that whilst I was working there, and it's been that connection to different places that's been so useful. Now I know I was even sort of thinking, well, when I'm learning, I'm living, and I really feel that, and meditation really does help, I think, with learning.
Can you say more about how it was that meditation really helped you to learn, especially when you're stepping into very different environments and so on that as you said,
Yeah,
different to the background you came from. How
yeah,
did meditation
yeah.
help?
I mean, I think for me it helps in a way of allowing me to be more open. I mean, having better ears
Mm.
and better eyes, probably. I'm not a great observationalist, but I can listen reasonably well, and so that I'm not necessarily listening to me and myself, and the issues that are constantly I'm trying to deal with, but because I'm a bit calmer, and I'm a bit more reflective, then I can just be in a situation to learn. And because it's not about me. I mean, a lot of my issues are about me. And, one of my biggest issues has always been, my ego. And so how do I put that aside, and really look and learn and listen? And even over the last 15 years, I've been really starting to work on leadership skills and all those things we don't learn in medicine or in public health, but I would otherwise call essential human skills. And one of the really interesting things is how to listen well. And as you know, as a clinician, how important that is. Well, even just working with other people all the time, listening is the best form of communication, I think. And meditation has just allowed me to calm and be there and be present.
Yeah. In the research that looks at mindfulness and what it means to
Yeah.
be unmindful, I often talk about default mental activity,
Yep.
like the endless chatter and commentaries
Mm,
running in our
mm.
head. And I was interested in one psychological psych journal, talking about when they look at the contents of it, it's all around the multifaceted self. But what you were talking before about me and my stuff and everything. But I was interested as well, when you said listening was so important. One of the most widely sort of used term for Indigenous meditation in parts of Australia is the dairy, which translates as deep listening.
Yeah.
And was it just listening to what people are saying, or is there listening on a deeper level? And
To Melbourne, and I'd think, oh well, my totems are green trams and blue cobblestone. I mean, this is where I was, born in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, or lived anyway. And the notion that I knew there was something much more about where I was connected to and to whom I was connected than I'd ever appreciated before. And you watch that in Central Australia and amongst our under people, and appreciate it and look at it and learn from it. So. Um, I it's probably less at a really deep level than I may have that I should have been there. But I felt I did learn a lot. I mean, that was an interesting time when we had children and you have less disposable time. I was probably meditating less there than I have in other periods of time where I've been able to commit, as I can now, much more time to it. And I know now it's obviously a really good avenue for aging well, and I hope dying well. It'll be it'll be useful because I've found I'm gently addicted to meditation. If I stop it for a day or 2 or 3 days, I know the level of background chatter starts to increase. The letter of sort of quietly being pushed off or loudly being pushed off balance tends to increase. You're a bit slow to come back to the central point of balance. Like physical exercise, for me, meditation has it's been really, really useful in that sense.
Yeah. You said that the quarter life crisis was kind of what got you into. Are you happy to say anything about the quarter life crisis and
Well,
why it was
yeah.
that you went to meditation rather than, I don't know, to something else that you
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, and this is like don't do this at home. But it was actually a um, a major overdose of hash at a Lou Reed concert, and was I think Lou Reed did two concerts in that year in Australia, but completely as Ken Kesey and others described, sort of can break that, just lets that outpouring of the sort of subconscious or whatever into the conscious. And I found it really difficult to manage, and I was much more anxious and much more unstable for this was doing fourth year medicine. Then went off to do an elective, and I did it in Hong Kong, having wanted to do it in India. So then went traveling to Nepal, and then came back from Nepal to Raxal and in India, and then to Gaya and Bodh Gaya. So this was the place where Buddha gained enlightenment, and there are a whole lot of different. I mean, it's a bit like Canberra. There's a whole lot of different temples there from different countries, and so it's sort of and I met the people who were in the Burmese Vihar, and they'd just done a 10-day Vipassana course, and I was really impressed with them. And I was thought, maybe I wouldn't normally be attracted to, but they just seemed to have something about them that was interesting. And then I became interested, and it took me 2 years to do a 10-day course in Australia because we really weren't doing them then. And then the first one I did was in a primary school outside Toowoomba in 1976 with a John Coleman, who was a former CIA agent, who'd been who'd been taught by Uba Kin, and then I became very interested and didn't know much about it to begin with, but I mean, ironically, I thought, after the first course, oh, Nirvana's just around the corner. And then when I did my second course, I realized, well, it's actually a bit further. And my third course, it's a bit further than that. And the more you know, the more you know there is to know. So I've just been thankful that I've been able to do courses. And I mean, to be honest, Craig, I would come back from these courses and tell everybody about them and go, "Well, my goodness, you must do them." And then it took me a while to realize, as I do now, people need to find their own rhythm and their own way of doing it. It's not suitable for everybody. How do you find what really helps you in your own pace and rhythm and lifestyle?
Yeah. So what did you start to find from your practice? What did it start to show you, teach you, that help you to manage those challenges that you were previously
Yeah,
having
yeah.
confronted by, the contents of a distracted
Mm.
mind and so on? What did it show you?
Well, I mean, as I said before, it really stops the the chatter, the intrusive thoughts, the anxieties that are constantly coming back to sort of bite you, if you like, and establish the sort of a level of inner peace that I was able to do more and so be less absorbed with just what's going on with me, and more interested in what's going on in the world. And it also, in many ways, has given me a lot of hope in the notion that I'm doing it because I want to be a better person. Is my fundamental, I mean, I'm not a good person, just that I can be better, and it helps me to be more loving, more interested, more engaged, and more present. And for me, that's important. But look, to be honest, Craig, it took me 20 years to realize you really have to do this every day. And I would do courses and then not do something for quite a long time, and I'd fall up. And that happened when I was working for UNAIDS in Geneva, I was really working hard, traveling a lot, not coping particularly well. Realized I'd really fallen off the horse, if you like. And Annie, my partner, was sufficiently generous enough to say, "Yeah, go off and go into a course and get yourself together," basically. And that really did help. And I came back to Melbourne. Started meditating a lot more, doing courses. It was when I was at Vic Health, and again, I just found that enabled me to work better because I was meditating more regularly, and gives you a sense of I can do this. I can cope with the overwhelm that happens every now and then. Yeah,
Because one of the first sort of jobs you had, I think you're working with refugees in Sudan,
yeah,
and also in Indigenous communities. So I guess I would have seen people dealing with some quite confronting things and so on. So you'd had some meditation experience. How did that help? In what ways did it help you to work with and be with challenging
yeah.
experience, but also to kind of develop that greater sense of cultural sensitivity and inclusiveness and so on? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in sort of demanding or conflicting situations, or life is constantly pushing us off balance. But for me, it's like those Russian dolls that have a weight in the bottom of it, and then you're pushed over, and then it's how quickly can you? And meditation really helps you to come back to a point of balance where that point of balance, I think we are the most effective. I mean, it's a bit like dancers or sporting people, where those that can hold their balance, and we
Mm,
can watch good politicians, or, people that really, I think, are successful do come back to that balance point, and that's where they're most effective. And in those situations where you're constantly being pushed off balance by virtue of may have nothing to do with you, but what's happening in the environment you're living, then it's a level of equanimity, of being able to manage those really disruptive forces outside and then maybe inside that really allows you to be the most effective. And you know, if you're constantly off balance, it's really hard to do your job well. It's really hard to have open ears and open eyes and open minds. So again, it's a very personal um, impact on my well-being. I mean, really interesting. Coming back to to the COVID era, Craig. I didn't get long COVID, but I got long lockdown.
mm,
And I realize that it's part of the notion of being able to connect with people that's really important for my own sense of mind and sense of peace. But I wasn't meditating particularly once, so I really had to get back into it because I was developing a form of what I would call emotional autoimmune disease, where you where you sort of attack yourself. I mean, it's
mm,
what happens quite a lot, where you're constantly sort of either undermining, you're no good, you're not this, you're not that, or this is happening and that's and I found that really quite intrusive, and that's when again really started to up my meditation and have been in much more balance since then. But it was really quite an interesting experience that, literally only 5 years ago when I'm sort of late 60s, you can be pushed off balance at any time.
mm. Well, people talk, there's the old phrase, we probably wouldn't use it too much these days, but boredom's the devil's playground. But
Yes,
seems
yeah,
like when there's not much for the attention to go
yeah,
to, not much to be mindful and connected with, then the
yeah,
mind
yeah,
has got freedom of reign to just
yeah,
run anywhere it likes. It
yes.
extends to, like, I suppose a dog that's not well trained, it's digging up the garden and ripping everything,
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
cushions and
no.
everything.
And it's just interesting how I mean, the importance of it, know thyself and what makes you as well as you can be, and whether that's a combination of, for me, and I was just talking with my kids about this, about it, because they're saying, well, why don't you see a therapist? And I'm going, well, I'm actually quite okay with this, but it's physical exercise and stretching and connection, and sleep and meditation that all puts it together.
Mm.
for me. But it's, I think we're as individuals, we've got to find the right recipes for the way we create our own emotional balance and emotional regulation and
Yeah.
self-awareness. Yeah.
When stepping into environments and seeing, overseas and everywhere in the work you were doing, I dare say you were crossing paths with people that experienced quite a lot of trauma, major life events that, that to a
Mm,
large extent,
mm,
in a place like Australia, much of the time we're sort of shielded from in the normal run of life. People talk about vicarious stress and vicarious trauma, like
trauma.
experiencing the stress or the trauma that others are experiencing. And sometimes, one way of dealing with that is to wall oneself off as a kind
Mm,
of a
mm,
protection thing
mm,
and become
mhm,
cold,
mm, mm.
clinical, etc. How did you find that capacity to remain open and present to trauma and stress and so on, but without getting lost in the vicarious stress and vicarious
Yeah.
trauma? Was that an easy line to walk, or was it something that took you quite some time to sort of find how to do that?
Well, I think I would have done it badly and well at different times in my life, and it is the sort of whether this is the right definition, but the difference between empathy and sympathy. I mean, empathy just being literally beside people
Mm,
and with them, but not taking on the emotional load and
mm,
labor,
mm,
which I think is is a really necessary skill for working in those situations or for handling any level of trauma, of interpersonal conflict. It's how do we observe, and you've been obviously talking about this for many, many years, how do we observe but not react? And I'm even teaching this in the leadership skill stuff is about how to respond, not react. And so that you're really, or you're acting, not reacting. And so you've thought through what's happened and what's the most effective response here rather than that knee-jerk response. And, I've obviously got myself into trouble when I've done that. And both in terms of being a bit silly. I remember I was trying to give blood at the Gaddafi Hospital. This is way out in eastern Sudan, right? And I was going, and I'd gone through one part of the hospital, and then I had to go through a gate, and the guy wouldn't let me go through the gate. So I said, "Oh, bugger that," and I just leapt the gate. And he must be, wait, what is this guy? What's this Hawaja doing? Like this madman. So, I don't claim to at all be emotionally well balanced all the time, but you lose it sometimes. But again, it's so much of this stuff is related to the need to practice regularly.
Yeah.
And that, as I said, took me a long time to learn, but that's my most important lesson for me about a particular, whatever form of meditation you use, then practice it. Yeah.
Well, it seems like in some way, the self-awareness that comes with
Mm,
that capacity to observe is really important. Like
mm.
with reacting, I mean, it seems to me like it's often something that's like press play on a reaction, and before we know where we are, we've said
Yep.
something. Whereas it seems like in moments of being more present and aware, the reaction arises, and we are human. I mean, it's not like, but there seems to be that little bit of distance from it that
Mm.
provides the opportunity to choose response. And was it kind of
Yeah.
like
And
with
And I remember you talking about, well, it's a train coming through the station.
Hmm.
Well, don't hop on the train, just watch it go through, which I love, and I think that's a very good metaphor for how you're dealing with these issues. Being able to, and of late, actually, I've got better at being able to observe um, thoughts and then observe the sensation that they bring. And
Hmm.
it's really being able to focus on the sensation that has resulted from the thought, if you like,
Mm.
and watching that so that you're not actually engaging with the thought, you're just watching the physical reaction and then just observing and letting that go, and then the thinking goes as well. So that's been a really helpful thing for me, really helpful in being able to say, well, there's a thought around that sort of produces anxiety or sadness or disruption, and it's often for me always in the front of my, from the top of my chest to my belly, and being able to just simply observe that has been really, really useful in understanding impermanence and understanding that no, it's not going to be there forever.
Yeah. I mean, with the body scan, which is a kind of a mindfulness practice of moving attention through the body, I mean, it seems like it gives a bit of a wake up to the whole proprioceptive sensory areas
Yeah,
of the brain.
yeah,
I mean, well, why pay attention to the body? I mean,
yeah.
get on and do something
Mm.
useful. But it seems like in these difficult moments, it's like
Oh,
it's like it takes the cover off the car
absolutely.
dashboard, and all of a sudden you
Yeah,
see all sorts of, the red light when it's flashing, you recognize,
yeah,
oh, that's a useful piece of information, and
yeah,
that awareness, that physical awareness.
yeah, and that it's actually being, and it's an easier thing to deal with um, watching the sensation rather than tangling the thought,
Hmm.
and this notion that we are not our thoughts, we are us, but often we get so entangled with, oh my goodness, this thought arose, I'm then responding in 10 different ways to it
Yeah.
without just saying, okay, well, and particularly around sleep,
Hmm.
why do people stay awake all night? Because they're anxious about stuff. Well, we're constantly going back over
Hmm.
what we can do. I mean, ironically, I've found another advantage of meditation is it handles jet lag incredibly well.
Hmm.
I've obviously traveled a lot, and you're always off, well, you're often out of kilter. And then to utilize meditation as a way of, I can, get up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I can't get to sleep, and then meditate, and then I'll be back asleep.
Yeah.
Really, really, it's a sort of not a non-advertised side benefit.
Yeah. I've found it on many occasions myself as well. Um, I'm just interested to just looking at the different directions your career has taken you. So moving to, being the head of Vic Health
Yep.
is a big shift in the kind of work you were doing. I mean,
Mm,
not unrelated, but
mm.
quite a shift. What was there something that drew you to that, and I'd be interested also, in your reflections on are we getting prevention right in our community, or are we spending way too much time treating things that perhaps we should be preventing in the first place? So, firstly, what led to your sort of steering your career in that direction?
Well, I'd actually been involved a lot with HIV in the very early days, which is when I was in Central Australia, and then HIV came. This is in the mid 80s, and then there was and I came down and worked for the state health department for a couple of years on HIV. So I really started to learn about the notion of the need for prevention, because that's really all we had at that stage. And I became very attracted to this notion of prevention involves working with the community, and involves really engaging with people who, maybe at much higher risk than others, and really listening to them, and working with them and learning from them. So I found that really interesting, because I had a decision to, well, I was then really working as a GP, so do I stay and work as a general practitioner, or do I work full time in public health, or I work in community health? And I found I couldn't do both, so I just focused on public health. And then these jobs came up, and I found that really, really fascinating. So I learned so much about how to work with and learn from communities. And then once had moved to Geneva and came back to Australia, then Vic Health was such an interesting job, because it was all about prevention. And that's why its origin story is all about prevention. And then I learned a lot about tobacco and alcohol and junk food, which I knew very little about beforehand. But I found that fascinating. Um, and I've always been, you could ask everybody on the call, would you subscribe to the belief that prevention is better than cure? Okay. And everybody will put their hand up. The point is, um, when we fund it in exactly the opposite way.
Mm.
We're funding cure all the time. The drive for cure at a political level is very important, and I can understand exactly why. And so we are doing a not a very good job in Victoria, let alone Australia, in terms of the amount that we're putting into prevention. And we're seeing we've got into a situation where because we're not doing that, we're seeing more and more load on hospital end of sort of tertiary and quaternary care. We could be doing, if we were mimicking, looking at what the Scandinavians do, for example, then there's much higher levels of investment in upstream prevention. We've been following, more and more the US model, which is about more and more treatment, and
Mm.
that's unfortunate. And in the process, because I've worked a lot around tobacco and alcohol and junk food, and looking at the impact of commerce um, on our health, then the industries that are harmful have got more and more powerful as governments have become weaker and weaker in a sense because they've been attacked. So I mean, there's a really good story, book by Naomi Oreskes called "The Big Myth" about how in the US they've spent literally 100 years telling the US population the government is your enemy.
Mm.
Don't regulate the market. Don't have taxes. Don't interfere. Just let the market fundamentalism that will carry the day, and that's a big issue. So we've got real challenges ahead of us, and that's why we need places like Vic Health. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's the most obvious thing in the world, but I often feel like prevention is the hardest thing. I mean,
Oh,
we know, oh, yeah, exercise, eat a better diet, manage our stress, don't, drink too much, all these kinds of things. But they're the hardest things, especially, if we're younger and we don't have a chronic illness or a major kind of it's very hard to change behavior. It's the whole psychology of it. Um,
mm.
have you the lessons you were learning along the way about human psychology and human motivation, did that really help you in your work with Vic Health?
Yeah, I think it has. I mean, they've been both personal lessons and sort of societal lessons, I guess, and learning from other really good researchers. I think it's um, but I've also learned that that can be done very well, but prevention is really hard to get across to politicians because you don't see the value of prevention because you've stopped it, and it's hard to tell the story about something you've stopped rather than cured, actually, and so I think that there are real challenges in the way that we fund public health and the way that we prioritize it. We've got to get better at telling the stories about how and what works, and better, in fact. We need to learn from business about how to change behaviors
Mm.
because they're very good at changing them in the wrong way. But you need money and sort of influence and power to do that. And unfortunately, that money and power is going in the wrong direction. So it's become, I think, for public health people a tougher gig than it used to be. Governments are much less likely to want to regulate, and I'm talking about just sensible regulation. I mean, an example would be for just simply stop advertising junk food to and gambling to young kids during sport. Now that it's very hard to do. It should be very simple, and it would have a massive positive impact on our children's health, not only as children but as they go into adulthood. And unfortunately, we've fallen for the trap of, well, we'll take the money from the gambling industry, and because we need that because we're not collecting enough money in other taxes, but it has really bad rebounding effects in the long run, as does now. I mean, junk food is so much part of the sporting landscape. You
Mm.
know, everything's run by Macca's or KFC or God knows who, but it's normal, completely normalized. And another issue is the gambling industry, online industry, set about to get Australian kids to talk about sport in in odds terms, and they succeeded. So
Mm.
they turned something into a way. So I have a a fairly close understanding of what they're doing. It's just really tough to work on and work on how you can um, respond to that. It has to be around real building much stronger coalitions and working with a whole range of different groups in society. And it's the same for the work that we're trying to do in peace, in preventing war. Same issues. You've got to get a whole lot of groups together.
Yeah. It almost seems like, I mean, talk about meditation and so
Yep.
on, as like an individual kind of wakes us up a little bit to see a bit more of what's going on and driving our behaviors and reactions and
Mm.
etc. It almost seems like this is a collective waking up. That's
Absolutely. No, no. And this is the notion of people are talking about awakening. I mean, I know in your own really wonderful center about consciousness and contemplation, those things are really important. And it's how do we actually extend that not only the message, but the benefits from those approaches, I think is really part of the work that you're doing and hopefully we're doing as well.
yeah. Well, thank you, Robert. If you're happy to take some questions, I'm
Love to.
sure there are
Yeah.
a few coming in, and we'll
Sure.
just invite Jess to come back on and see if there are some questions that people would like to put to Rob.
Thanks, Craig. It's
Yeah.
been lovely talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, as always, we can just keep going. It's,
You know.
it's so interesting. You have so many nuggets.
Mm,
I've written a few down, Rob. I've just got, I think there were quite a few people were resonating with
mm,
when I'm learning, I'm living. And
mm,
yeah, it's quite beautiful.
mm.
Let's go to, we have so many, so I'm going to try get to them all. We have one here. What form or shape of meditation has worked best for you, Rob?
Well, to be honest, I started Vipassana meditation in 1976 and I sort of stuck with it. So, I mean, I'm not a great trialer of different forms. I found that useful and resonated with me, even though I did, as I sort of said, it took me 20 years to get to to really get to terms with it and to practice every day. I would do courses and hope that that would just flow on without actually doing the regular meditation. And as I've got older and older, I'm now doing it as I go to bed, when I wake up, when I'm driving or when I'm walking. I'm getting much better at just doing Anapana, simple breath meditation, as a way of reinforcing practice. Yeah. So, but it's very much each to their own. I think, there are so many different sort of forms you can use. I used to be much more, oh, we should do it this way. But I'm I'm not of that ilk anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great tip actually. Because what doesn't work for everyone, it doesn't always work for everyone.
No,
And
I mean
Vipassana,
we are so different.
yeah,
And finding your own way is really, but also maybe using other people's experience to help you find your own way.
Mm.
yeah, it's true. Because Vipassana is quite jumping in the deep end a little bit, isn't it? It's
Oh,
it's
10 days silent retreat. I mean,
it's like, well,
it's as they call emotional boot camp.
yeah,
Not,
So
not for the
yeah.
faint-hearted.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've got so used to it. It's
Yeah.
okay.
yeah.
And you sort
Um,
of have to face your demons a bit. So you really want to be okay with that. Yeah.
mm, yeah, no, that's a good point too. Let's jump to Elena's question here. She says, thank you so much for sharing your journey. It's really inspiring how you've integrated mindfulness and contemplation into global public health. With the rise of our very favorite topic, AI, well, very popular topic, she's curious about your take on how this shift will impact global mental health, especially when it comes to things like human connection, attention spans, and our ability to take time for inner reflection.
Right. Great question. I mean, if we even go back a step and look at internet and then social media, right? I mean, and go, "Wow, what wonderful progress we're making." Well, the thing that I started to worry about with even in the internet in the 90s was we're going to replace hugs with e-hugs.
Mm.
And we're going to do away with really important connection points. And we have, unfortunately, we've proven that we have greater e-connection and less personal and emotional connection than we've had before. So we tend not, we tend to sort of, not only us, but I mean, obviously the purveyors of this will focus very much on the upsides of the technology and the shift and won't focus on how to manage the downsides, because there will be certainly big downsides with AI. There may be great upsides for certain aspects of it if it's managed well. If you utilize AI well, then yes, it can be, but it's potentially got some really bad downsides. Little like whether it's around climate change or whether it's around the question that Elena brought up, then you know that's going to be we've got to adapt pretty quickly to those changes. I'm worried that we won't adapt all that quickly, although we won't really start to think about how do we manage the downsides as well as how do we manage the upsides. I mean, I'm still a bit of an AI troglodyte or luddite, as they say, but I'm working on it. Yeah.
It seems like attention kind of exercises the brain in a good way, that connection and so on. But from an increasing amount of research I've seen is that AI kind of makes the brain lazy, especially if we're using
Yeah.
AI to do the complex things that would normally exercise our thinking and our ability to put information together and so on.
Well, a really good example of that or metaphor for that is GPS. I mean, you're driving, you actually don't know how to get to a place without it. And
Mm,
you actually don't, you aren't aware of the physical geography that you're taking in. You've just gone from A to B without realizing how I got there.
mm,
And that's a metaphor for a lot of AI that'll take us through things without actually utilizing all of those pathways that really do stimulate and have really positive side effects. So yeah, I think we're gonna have to work hard at everything for example, that your center's doing is about how do we maintain presence.
mm,
Because I mean, this is a really dangerous
mm,
my
mm,
phone.
mm,
Webmates, I mean, it's designed to bring your attention constantly back to your latest email, your latest thing, and it's they know what worked. They worked out what attacks our attention and how to manipulate that and how to keep the what I would now call the Lord algorithm back to keeping you in touch with whatever you not necessarily should be in touch with, but it'll sell.
mm. Yeah. Mm,
Great, great answer. I know the phone, I was only thinking that this morning. The phone, it's just, yeah, I can't get it out of my hand sometimes. It's
Yeah, yeah.
uh, um, we've got so many questions. I'm sorry, we're not going to get to them all. But there are a few that are similar, so I'll try and grab those ones. In your experience with all your travels, which countries do you think or feel are leading the way with preventative health and orientating towards thriving, not just surviving?
Great, great question. I mean, interesting enough, not so much in my travels, but just I've been really interested in this issue for a number of years, and we looked at a whole range of indexes or indices around well-being. And there's probably 20, 25 of them. If you look at quality of life, life expectancy, peace index, press freedom, wealth distribution, a whole range of these. And if you look at, and we actually looked at them, and in the top 10 always are the Scandinavian countries, and probably Canada and Japan, to some extent New Zealand, sometimes Australia, where because there's an investment in the public, in the common in the commons, if you like, that there's a sufficiently high investment in public infrastructure, public education, public health, public provision of healthcare services, public transport, then they're the ones that tend to do better. They have higher levels of well-being, higher levels of survival, higher levels of happiness. Actually, I mean, it depends on how you want to live. The Finns are the happiest. I mean, which is interesting. But it's really, there's so much to learn from the approach that the northern states of in Europe have actually taken over the last 50 years. And interestingly enough, the US has the loudest megaphone by a long shot. And, it's 25th or 30th on all of these. We're listening to the wrong people. And that's why listen to the Norths, look at the Northern Lights.
That's a great answer. Sort of a segue within that, in your travels, have you seen people in different communities use contemplative practices, and what impact have you seen they have on their community health?
Yeah. I've done probably more work in um, Africa, in a number of countries in Africa where there's not a high level of contemplative practice. I mean, there is obviously I've done quite a lot of work in India, and in Nepal. So there is, a whole range of different contemplative practices in those countries and in those communities and the history of those countries and communities. The same with throughout Asia. So and I'm just learning from a young colleague about the notion of this sort of practice in South America as well, which I haven't been aware of, but are often associated with plant medicine and different sorts of treatments as well. But they're not just like, here's the tablet, here's the treatment. It's it's built into a system of contemplation as well, which I really respect and appreciate. Yeah. So um I mean, fundamentally, the subcontinent, India has been the home of so much of this in the long run, and that's why, and I've worked there quite a bit and that's why I've always loved being there.
Mhm.
That's great. All right, I might just squeeze in one more, if that's all right with everyone. Because a couple of people have asked as well, if you could leave our audience today with one practice or one reflection to take away, what would it be?
Well, I mean, this is very personal, but it's my own mantra, right? Which is get up, do good, be good, be. So it's the notion of, well, look, you've got to get into it. So you need to get up. The notion of um, trying to be good. I mean, this is trying, and then trying to do good, and then trying to be, has been a reminder for me about what am I trying to do.
Mm.
That's beautiful. I really like that one.
Mm.
We're
Okay.
at time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Time always passes far too quickly, as far as I'm concerned. So we could
Thanks.
have talked so much more, but thank you for being as generous as you have with your time and sharing, some of your journey. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Rob. And just to thank you to everybody who's been on the call today, and for those who couldn't be here live, we'll have a chance to have a look at the recording as well. And next time we'll be with James Kirby and exploring why compassion matters and how to cultivate it. And James has been a researcher and teacher in this field for quite some time, so we'll look forward
Yeah.
to be a very nice segue from today and into that, Rob.
Yeah. No, well, thank you very much, and thank you for the work that your center's doing. It's brilliant. It's really inspiring. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Craig. And thanks, everyone. See you later.